Alright, so for this tutorial, we're going to be doing a GeoH eyeball, and I don't really have much to say about this, so let's just jump right in. Now I already have my tracks done, so what I need right now is a 3D scan of my face. Over here in Blender, you can see I have one prepared. I made this scan using my iPhone with the Bellis 3D Face Scan app. It's not perfect, but it will get the job done. You can see that I did a quick little piece of retopology just so I had something cleaner to look at in SYNTHEYES. So back in SYNTHEYES, I'm going to do a quick alignment of my camera to fit the room and just let it sit there. Alright, so it looks like I got something decent here. I'm going to go and click on grid and hit left side grid, just so I can also take a look at my Y lines. I can click on move grid and then drag around in my viewport if I want to move the lines around my scene, check things out. Let's make it floor grid again. Now let's bring in my head object just to roughly scale and position this. You can go file, import mesh, but for some reason I have a weird habit of going to import in a magic wand. You can import in two ways. You can come up to file, import mesh, wherever that is. Oh, there it is. Or you can come over to the objects, import, click your magic wand. Alright, now that I have this head imported, let's go ahead and orient my scene. I'm going to come to translate, hole, and right click 3D hole FX meshes off, and drag it back. Beautiful. So I don't care that this isn't perfect. We're going to turn this into an object and pin it more accurately. First, I'm going to reset the color on my image. It's kind of bugging me. I'm going to hit P, image prep, reset. So now we have our camera aligned to the room. We have our mesh in the scene. Now let's turn this into a solvable object. Now to do this, I'm going to come up to Shot, Add Moving Object. So now we have a new moving object, but if you click it and try to move it, your mesh doesn't follow. So we have to parent this mesh under the object. I'm going to come up to Windows, Floating Hierarchy View, and here you can see I have Object 1 with nothing under it. I can take our head 3D, drag it over Object 1, and there we go, now it's parented. Also, all these here, the trackers that are under my camera, shouldn't be under my camera. So I'm going to shift, how do I select, come on. Shift click, I'm going to drag these under Object 1, and now we have our object with our mesh and our trackers parented underneath. So now for the fun part, let's go ahead and pin this mesh into position. First, let's pick our favorite frame. I'm going to go with this one for some reason. So I'm going to hit F3, and if you're not already locked to your camera, come up and hit lock. And if you don't have this toolbar, hit L on your keyboard. So you can see the image plane is covering up our mesh. Easy fix, come over to Solver, and with world size, add an extra 0, make it 1000. You might not have to do this, my mesh just happens to be really big coming out of this app. So now we want to get our pinning toolbar. You can right click, come to toolbars, pinning. And we're going to switch into wireframe mode. I'm going to hit the / key that's underneath backspace on my keyboard. And once I come to create and edit pins and click this, now I can drag my mesh around. Wow. I'm going to control click this pin to get rid of it, and I'm going to start with the corners of my eye. I want to grab the tip of my nose, but notice that the wireframe is kind of overlappy and a little ugly. So I'm going to right click, view, occluded wireframes on. If you're working with versions of SYNTHEYES prior to 1903, you're not going to have that. So now I can click this and bring it on in. Grab the corner of my other eye. Kind of lining up my cheekbones. I don't really care about anything down here, but might as well. Chin, sure, why not? Grab the other ear. I don't really trust the scan too much, so that's okay. Let's have another look at the nose. If your mesh isn't fitting 100%, one thing you could do quickly is try to change field of view to changes. This will adjust the focal length of your camera as you pin. I'm not going to do that because I already kind of made my room with lines, and that calculated a focal length with me. I'm just going to go with it. I like my camera alignment and I don't want to screw it up. If I turn it on and mess with this, there you can see my camera's changing and I'm a very unhappy boy. Undo. So it's a little hard to see what my nose is doing with this view. I'm going to go back to F2 and solid shade, and I'm going to hide and show my mesh and just see where the edge of my nose is. You can see right at the tip of my mouse. It's actually not too bad for what we're doing, so I'm just going to go with it. So let's go ahead and drop our trackers on the mesh. F2. I'm going to highlight everything I want. Wait a minute. I'm missing a tracker. I could have sworn I had a tracker tracked on my ear. Let's go ahead and track one more point real quick. Alright, not too bad, not too great, whatever. Now that I've tracked that point, I lost the frame that I pinned on, so let's go back to F3, and here on the pinning menu, you can see we have jump to frame. Oh, that didn't work. Oh, I'm going to turn off create edit pins. Wait, I'm going to select the mesh. Now that I've selected the mesh, I can go jump to 1027. There we go. Make sure that the ear is sitting in place, and it looks fine. Alright, back to F2. Let's go and select all the trackers that I'm going to want to drop. Basically everything except for this ear pod point. I'm going to come up to track, drop into mesh, happy. So now that we have the points dropped on a mesh, now it's time to solve. So before we hit solve, let's go back to our camera 1, under solver, and make sure that our focal length is set to known on the first frame, because we want to keep what we established earlier. If you have distortion calculating, make sure it's not checked on. And we're going to set our solver mode to disabled. Now when we solve this head, it's not going to mess with our main camera in any way. So I'm going to jump back to object 1. So to solve this object, I'm going to turn on constraint since we're dealing with locks. Let's switch into wireframe. So I'm going to see what happens if I immediately hit go. Okay, so it looks like it just worked already. If it hadn't worked, I would have messed with my beginning and end frame and possibly the hint direction. So since this worked, let's go ahead and do a quick refine of the distance. Object solves tend to have a little bit of jitter in the Z depth from the camera. This isn't too bad, but we're going to smooth it anyway really fast. I'm going to come over to filtering control, distance, apply, reset, close this, switch over to refine solve, axis locks. On our first frame, we're going to lock distance. I'm going to turn the weighting up to 90. It's kind of a harder weighting. And get that distance loaded in. There is our data here. When I hit play, you can see it animates. And now hit solve. If you zoom in on the object or just look at your solve error, you can see that things have updated very slightly. We now have a softer object in depth. So now let's jump on into the actual main event. So to start up this eyeball, let's head over to the GeoH tab, and we need to make a joint to represent our eyeball. So I'm going to come over and open up GeoH toolbar, come up to GeoH create. I'm going to hold shift and left click. And now we're creating a new joint. While I'm holding shift, it's snapped to the planar axis of the head that's facing the camera. I'm going to let go of left click. If you had let go of shift first, then it would have been snapping to a mesh. So make sure you let go of left click first. So now that we have this, let's split our viewport so we can have two angles of this. I'm going to come up to the layout dropdown, camera and perspective, and I'm going to change one view to perspective B. Now we have two 3D viewports. By the way, if you're comfortable with programs like Maya or Houdini, you might want to navigate like so. Come over to Edit, Edit Preferences, head over to Perspective, and enable Maya style navigation in Perspective. Now you can Alt left click, Alt right click to navigate. So over here, we're looking at the new object I created. I'm going to move this ahead. So to do that, I'm going to come over to our transforms on the left here. I'm going to drag the eye ahead on the Z axis, a little bit on the X, hold shift to slow, ooh, not shift. Shift just went light speed. Hold control to slow it down. Drag it down on Y. So now I'm going to add a sphere to represent my eyeball. I'm going to hit F4, 3D, come over to the meshes, make a sphere, roughly the size of an eye. And I'm not going to move this into place just yet. I'm going to zero this out so it snaps over to the object, but we need to parent this sphere under our new object. So let's open up Window, Hierarchy View. You can see we have Sphere. Let's rename this to Eyeball. And down below, we have our object 2 that we made. Let's call this Eye. Object. I'm going to drag Eyeball under Eye Object, and now we have our mesh parented under our object. Actually, I'm going to undo this real quick. The eyeball, I'm going to zero it out to the world space by right-clicking the transforms. I'm going I'm going to also drag eyeball out into this blank world space and then zero it out. I just want to center it real quick because I want to move the pivot to the middle of the sphere. Because when I try to scale this, you can see it scales from the bottom, and it's a little bit annoying to work this way. So to move the pivot, hit Ctrl P on your keyboard. And now you can see we are set into Edit Pivots mode. It should say that in all your viewports. I'm going to hit F3, Orbit, Alt left click and drag, and look at my sphere. I'm going to drag up the coordinate handle until it's lined up to the center. And I can hit Ctrl P, and now I'm back to normal. So I can zero out the transforms again, and now it's perfectly centered. So I'm going to take eyeball, drag it back under eye object, and back to the transforms I can zero this out, and you can see that it is already snapped over to our object. I'm going to come over to rotations and right click, zero this all out too. And we want one of the poles to aim forward. So which axis is that? Oh good, it's the second one. I'm going to type in 90. There we are. Hopefully you have a better model than this to work with, so maybe yours will be a better fit, but I'm going to let my eye sit right there behind the mesh. So I'm just going to guess the scale of this eye, and I'm actually kind of okay with where it is for what we're doing, so I might just leave it. Let's head back over to GeoH track, select our eye object, and if we go to the first frame and hit play, the object is now going to lock along with the head. It's not moving or animating because everything is locked, but it holds the position that we set for it. So everything is now set up for us to track a point and attach it to the object. So let me track a quick point on my eye. So now I have a point track for my eye, and I know that this isn't the actual surface. I can't remember the anatomy, like the names and stuff, and I don't feel like Googling it right now. So yeah, trust me that we're going to account for the little error in depth here. Because, you know, the actual surface of my eye is somewhere right here because the old, what was that, cornea? I think it's a cornea. Was this a retina? I have no clue. Anyway, you'll see. I have all the time in the world right now to Google it, and I'm not gonna. How sad is that? So now we want to put this tracker under our eye object. So I'm going to select it, come over to Window, Hierarchy View, and our one point, which is under Camera, I don't know why I tracked it under Camera, we can drag it under Eye Object, and now that it's here, we want to project it onto our mesh. So come up to Track, drop on the mesh, and if I hit F4, look over here and see where our seed point landed, I want the point to be more on the pole of this sphere. Let's hit F3, Orbit, and take a better look at this. Let's turn off Occluded Wireframe for a second, and take a better peek at this. So this seed point, I want it to be in line with the actual axis of the eye, because that's where it should be centered. Because like I said, I didn't track the cornea, if that's what it's called. I tracked that inner weird colorful bit. So let's do something fancy. I'm going to come into Trackers, and here we got a little nudge tool in the seed and lock options. If I drag this plus and minus, you can see that I'm dragging it in and out of the mesh. We're going to do this in a moment after we rotate our eye into position. So I'm going to L lock to camera, take a look at the eye. So we need to rotate this so that the rings line up with my eye. So selecting eye object, come over to GeoH track. Let's just get our perspective camera back. And on the left side, we're going to adjust pan. Yes, pan is 1. And tilt. Yes. So we're going to line up tilt. And roll. Our eye just doesn't do this. I don't know how else to say it to you. Your eye just doesn't roll. Doesn't really roll. Yeah. So anyway, I'm going to select my tracker and redrop it on the mesh. So track, drop into mesh, and it's position changed. So now let's go into F3. Oh, we're already here. Wow. Hit orbit. And let's go and drag over here. And I want to line it up with this vertice and the object diamond. So we're going to slide it back until it lines up. So trackers, nudge. There we go. And now we got the inner portion of the eye. So I'm going to lock the camera, select our eye object, and all we have to do now is come back to GeoH, unlock pan and tilt. I'm going to go do that on my first frame. So I've unlocked that, and we're also going to uncheck key so that we turn off image-based tracking. And now the eyeball has snapped into position. So when I hit play, magic. So very simple and fun thing to do. To view this a little bit better, I'm going to click on Solver. Let's close up all these panels. We don't need them. Open up Hierarchy View. I'm going to select Eyeball, 3D, color it something bright. Let's go blue. And the head mesh, I'm going to color it black. And I can hit J on my keyboard and also right-click, View, Show 3D Seeds off. And here we are. This is our finished GeoH eyeball. So I hope you learned something. This one was kind of a tricky tutorial to put together. It was a little bit messier than I thought. And I don't know, maybe I'll revisit it in the future when I'm old. That got kind of sad. Just kind of reminded myself of my mortality. All right, anyway. Let's just end off this tutorial with an existential crisis. All right, bye.